What I just done read.
Waugh! Huh! Yeah! Evelyn Waugh. Naturally. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. Hello, my name is Max. This is What I Just Done Read, episode 10 of What I Just Done Read. And today we'll be looking at the works of Evelyn Waugh. Before we get on to that, thank you to everyone who's been checking out the channel, checking out the show. You are more than welcome. And if you do like what I do here, if you do enjoy reading books and hearing a non-professional critic talking about them, then please do all the usual: like, share, subscribe, and that stuff. Evelyn Waugh. If you were with us last time, as I'd always end up saying, then you'll know that this time we're looking at his first novel, Decline and Fall. Before we get to that, as always, we have the business of our word of the day. And for today, that is cavil. That's cavil with one L, not to be confused with Mr. Cavil with two L's. Anyway, cavil. It is a petty or minor objection, synonym of a grumble or a quibble, if you like. But yeah, that's basically it. Don't really need to say much more than that. It's a nice little word. I kind of quite like it, and probably will use it at some point in the future. Shall we talk about war? Yeah, let's talk about war. So if you've been following this series so far, then you'll know I have kind of got into a habit of dropping in and I'll give you a bit of a biography of the author about whose work we're going to be talking, before moving on to the work itself. If you've seen the last couple of episodes, then you'll know that sometimes these have a tendency to get longer and longer, to the point, especially with the last one, that I think I actually spent more time talking about the author than I did about the book itself. So as a way of kind of knocking that on the head a bit, what I thought I'm going to try and do, and it's kind of an easy one to do with Evelyn Waugh, with Decline and Fall, because it was his first novel, is I'll give you a biography of the author up to and around the point that the work we're going to be discussing was written. That way it helps keep these a bit shorter, but it also means that, and again as I'm hoping to, if I ever come back to any of Waugh's other books, then I've already done some of the work, if you know what I mean. Don't know if it's going to work, but we'll see how we go. So, Arthur Evelyn St. John Waugh. I don't know if it's pronounced St. John. I'm getting that from a Bond film, but it might be St. John, but I think it's St. John Waugh. Was born in October 1903 in West Hampstead. He was the younger of two brothers, and he's one of those writers who is synonymous with the 20th century, especially with the early 20th century. Something of an enfant terrible. I think somebody in his later life commented about how can someone so unlikable have such a loyal and loving circle of friends. And that's something that seems to have come along later in life, but then again, he always was a bit like that. That he had a great future ahead of him was kind of never in any doubt, even from his early childhood. Between the ages of about 7 and 10, he and a group of his friends would write, rehearse and perform short plays, most of which were written by Waugh. A lot of them seem to have been based on a journal that was out at the time that was warning people about the dangers of an invasion of the UK by Germany. So a lot of their short plays were based on that kind of fear, which would have been extant in... not extant is still existing now. We're not afraid of Germany invading us, are we? I think we're good. But even to the point that his little circle of friends, who I think he referred to them, or they became known as the Pistol Troop, they ran messages for the War Office during World War I in London. Apparently there are stories of Waugh spending hours loitering outside the war rooms in London in the hopes of getting a glimpse of his hero, Lord Kitchener. That he was quite precocious and a very forceful personality, even at school. It cited the fact that he was a bit of a bully. Cecil Beaton, who would go on to be a society photographer in the 20s and 30s, was one of his victims at school and said that he never forgot it. So even at an early age, he was making his presence felt. His first published article in defence of Cubism was published in 1917 when he was only 14, which is pretty special. It's pretty sweet. I must admit, when I heard that, and I think it's more to do with the age, I was kind of put in mind of the great and the wonderful Jim Shooter, who used to be editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics, but who got his start writing Superman when he was 14. But again, that's a different story, so I'm going to go off on a tangent there about Jim Shooter. We're talking about Evelyn Waugh. Educated in London, he was expected to go to Sherborne College, like his older brother Alec. Unfortunately, there was something of a kibosh put on that when his older brother was asked to leave the college as the faculty suspected him of engaging in homosexual activity. So his parents instead sent him to Lancing College, which Waugh was not particularly happy about, as he saw it as a vastly inferior school. In the later years at college, he seems to have started to become a bit more of a tearaway. He was brought up as an Anglican Christian, and he started to lose his faith through those kind of years. He started partying a bit more and drinking quite heavily, something that would carry on through to his years at Oxford. While at Lancing, he started a club called the Corpse Club for those who are bored stiff. Graduating from Lancing College, he then went to Oxford, where he studied literature and English, I believe. I'll need to double check. Don't quote me on that. I haven't double checked that. One of his early passions was drawing, and he really wanted to be an artist, but was gradually becoming more and more enamoured of letters and words and becoming more of a wordsmith. As I said earlier, while at Oxford, he became more and more of a tearaway, spending more time partying than he was with his studies, especially in 1922 with the arrival of the likes of Harold Acton and Brian Howard, a couple of friends with whom he started another club called the Hypocrites Club. Both of those gentlemen would go on to become good friends of his, and also all three of them were very active members of the circle of friends who society liked to call the bright young things. As I said, he did a lot of partying. He himself, Waugh himself, explored his own sexuality and engaged in a number of homosexual affairs around that age as well. Unfortunately, as you can expect, this did kind of take its toll, and while he did technically do well enough in his final exams to get a third, he hadn't completed enough semesters that were required by Oxford for them to give him his degree, so he technically flunked out of Oxford. He then went on to try and pursue his career as an artist by going to art college, and that lasted about a term. Again, because of his heavy partying. Apparently, around this time, certainly into like the early to mid-20s, a lot of his time was spent staying around friends. He didn't really have a permanent residence himself. But with everything that was going on in the end, he kind of realised, I need to make some money. I can't just survive on I think it was an allowance of £4 a week or something like that he had from his father. As a result of which, he took a job working as a schoolmaster in a third-rate public school in North Wales. And his experiences from that I wouldn't say they figure directly in this, but they certainly informed and helped colour some of what's in decline and fall. That job he quit because one of his friends was working on a biography of Rossetti in Pisa and offered him a job. Unfortunately, that job also fell through after he'd quit his job in Wales. And I think this is one of the best anecdotes I could find about Waugh. At that time, he was so despondent and so depressed with his life and everything that he went down to the beach in North Wales, stripped himself naked, left his clothes in a tidy pile with every intention of walking out into the sea and ending his life. When he got into the sea, he was stung by a jellyfish and very quickly returned to shore. If you ever need evidence that God moves in mysterious ways, there you go. He would then go on to take another couple of jobs working as a schoolmaster in Buckinghamshire and also in London, but never for very long. And I think the one in Buckinghamshire, again, he was asked to leave after he drunkenly made advances on the matron. So, yeah. His first short story was published in 1926, called The Balance, and was followed in 1928 by this. In the interim of that, he did work for in a number of different professions, including being a journalist for the Daily Express, which included some foreign travel, working as a foreign correspondent, including being present at the coronation of Haile Selassie in Ethiopia. In 1928, he met Evelyn Gardner, the daughter of Lord and Lady Burghclere, and they fell in love and got engaged, much to the disappointment, shall we say, of Evelyn Gardner's parents. They didn't consider that Evelyn Waugh had the moral fibre that they thought was appropriate for their daughter. Obviously, both being called Evelyn, they became known as he Evelyn and she Evelyn. Unfortunately, their marriage didn't last too long. It lasted about a year when she revealed that a mutual friend of theirs had become her lover. Many of Waugh's friends noted that his experiences and his time with Evelyn Gardner and her betrayal, they changed him fundamentally. They found that he became a lot more bitter as a person in the aftermath of that. But that, again, going a bit further than we need to for this, so we'll maybe just discuss that a bit more another time. Decline and Fall. Published in 1928, he had worked on an earlier version of this which was called The Temple of Thatch, which he couldn't make work and in the end destroyed the manuscript. But a lot of the ideas and themes from that ended up in this. It was a critically acclaimed success when it first came out. Not surprisingly, and I can see why, because I did think about that, it was likened to the works of P.G. Wodehouse in its kind of superficial, or rather its slight at the superficiality of the upper class in the 1920s. I'd say there's a little bit more venom, though, in Waugh's work than what I find in Wodehouse. But that's basically what it is. It is a satire of public school life and the expectations of where you expect to find yourself within society if you have attended a public school. I'm not going to give you all of the blurb on the back here because it gives me a bit too much of the plot than I'd like to give. So all I will say here at the bottom, it says, sharply satirical and hilariously perceptive, Decline and Fall is vintage Evelyn Waugh. In my research for this, I did find a really nice radio interview with Waugh from the 1960s, and I'll probably put a link to it here somewhere as well as in the description. But I really love that the interviewer in there refers to him as being one of the most intellectually coherent writers of the 20th century. And absolutely it is. This book, which is almost 95 years old, is hilarious. More than once I was literally laugh out loud funny. The basic plot I can tell you is about a young man by the name of Paul Pennyfeather, who is accosted whilst trying to get back to his rooms by a club. I think they're called the Bulldog Club, and it's kind of hilarious because when you're looking at it from today, there are similarities to that too, like the Bullingdon Club today, of very rich ne'er-do-wells apparently attending university. But he's accosted, and as a result of which is booted out of Scone College in Oxford for what they perceive as indecent behaviour, even though it's kind of not his fault. And then the story follows what happens to his life over the preceding year after these events. How can I best describe it? It's kind of like attending a really good gig, especially if it's a really good metal gig. Your artist will wow the audience with a massive overture and then introduce subtleties and nuances over the course of the set without ever really losing that fervour of that opening. And that's kind of like this. It's kind of hits the ground running, and then at the time that it takes a pause for breath, you're already like 50 pages in and you're hooked. It's wonderful. It's so well written. I can understand why it's stood the test of time. There are some things in here that I do need to kind of very briefly touch on. It's not exactly a spoiler, but because it's something about the book that isn't really discussed, I wouldn't want to spoil that for anybody. So if you don't want to listen to this bit, then do go to the time code below. There is a short passage in this, about a third of the way through, that has gratuitous and repeated use of a particular racial slur. It doesn't appear in anywhere else in the book, it's just on this short section, and I was been trying to kind of gauge what the subtext of this is and why it was used. Was it simply because it was a word in common use at the time still? Or is it just simply a demonstration of Waugh's own bigotry? I don't know. I kind of like to feel, and I haven't really looked at this because I prefer to draw my own conclusions on this. I wonder if it's in there to show, again, it's another level of the disdain that the British upper class at the time had for other cultures. The fact that it was so systemic and that it was so casual, and that's why it's there. And even to the fact that he has his main character, who's otherwise quite affable and likeable, and just very quite naive, he even engages in it as well. So I'm not sure if that's the point of it. I don't know, you'd have to read it for yourselves and see what you think. What I really loved as well is the kind of surface outrageousness of the other characters in the book. It really deepens the impact of their more philosophical moments later in the work, of which there are just enough to give the work pathos and really kind of fill it out. It is, even as the critic at the time said, it is a masterpiece. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend that you do. As I said, I'd like to say a little bit about the product itself. I was kind of lucky. I mean, this copy itself is a hardback copy from, this print was from 1989. But the version itself, interestingly enough, there's a lovely little preface in here from Waugh himself. So when the book was first published in 1928, his original publisher that he approached turned it down, said it was too outrageous. So he took it to, what's the name of the company? Chapman and Hall, who, curiously enough, his father was the managing director of, even though he wasn't there when he took work in. And they asked there to be some slight changes to the work. In 1961, when the book was when they were preparing a new edition, Waugh took the opportunity to set the record straight, if you like, and put the work back as he'd originally intended it, which is what this version is. I can see why. There's one bit that he does mention in the preface that was asked to be changed, and yeah, I can see why they changed at the time. But again, to us now, it's perfectly acceptable and it wouldn't make any difference. What the other bits are, because he does say he also made some literary criticisms which were perhaps less valuable. But again, I don't know what those were. I might have a look at them and find out, just for my own edification. But it's kind of nice. It's kind of like having an author's cut of the book, which is lovely. There are also in this edition as well. Oh, come on. There we go, right at the start. There are some really nice drawings. There's only about half a dozen of them, but there are some really nice drawings by Waugh himself, which are really nice. Very pleased to have this, and thank you again. I can't remember who did this. Again, was probably my friend Ben suggested this one. So thank you for that, because Waugh's been on my list for a long time. As I said, it was a critical success. He wouldn't actually go on to get any proper commercial success until Vile Bodies, which came out in 1930. Well, this is a satire, generally a satire of English upper class. Vile Bodies is more of a satire on the bright young things themselves. So that one may end up on the list at some point. I don't really know what else I can say about it, actually. I've kind of covered the product itself. I mean, as I say, the product, nice and simple typeface. Nice little picture of the man himself at the back there. And of course, hardback. We like hardback books. I have thoroughly enjoyed this. And kind of, again, like I was saying, like the whole thing with this, which again, still haven't had anything for, so come on. I'm glad I've gone with reading this one as opposed to reading Brideshead Revisited, which is obviously Waugh's best known work, which I may come to. But I think even today a lot of people say that this is still his funniest book, which, if I do get a chance to read any others, we'll see. Anyway, I'm blathering now. I'm going to put this to one side, and we are going to go and do the do with the jar of eyes, which we have here. So while I do that, why don't you prop up the mantelpiece and have another martini. And here we are once again. Right, what do we have? Decline and fall, yes. So, there we go. Not surprisingly, a large eye for the work itself. I've gone for the slightly smaller eye for the product. Not that I don't like it. I do like it. So it's decent. It's very serviceable, and there are some lovely things in it. But again, as I think I mentioned last time, only having 4 different sizes of eyes, I need to be a bit more discerning. Something has to be a really standout piece of a literary artifact, if you like, to justify the big eye for that. Fantastic. So we can put this out of the way. We can then go to the list. As you can see, I've added some new things onto the list as well, but more about that another time. And we, where are we? Decline or fall, down here. There we go. All gone, all done. On to the next. So this one we're going to go right down to the bottom of the list here. And for the first time we're going to be revisiting an author. My favourite French author, Théophile Gautier. And we are looking at his novella, La Mort Amoureuse, otherwise in English known as Clairemont. And I will get into this very soon, because it's only quite short. But that will be next time. Until then, I hope everything with your life is quite topping, and now get thee gone. If you're looking for other ways of saying things and don't want to spend ages hammering your way through a thesaurus trying to find interesting and different ways to... I've kind of lost myself. This is probably going to be the outtake.